Hello, Great Trials. I hope you guys are doing well. My laptop is just starting up, so I'm probably been staring at the screen for a couple of seconds. I'm quickly putting together this video as I know you want to have a little something to help you with your class test. I hope you can hear me nicely. Okay, so I'm going to be looking this side. Okay, I want to keep the screen on so you got something to look at. Okay, but my big screen is over here. My eyes are not the best at the moment, so I'm going to be using the big screen. So, obviously with business environments, you've got micro, macro, and market. You know the drill by now with micro, macro, and market. You know Pestle is outside of the business. You cannot control Pestle. Porter is inside, outside as well, but it's a bit more influence. And then micro is inside. You know that. I want to focus on the financial part because I know some of you are really worried about the ratios. So the first thing that you talk about is you have your own capital or you have borrowed capital. And then you have your two. The balance sheet looks at assets and liabilities, whereas income sheet is income and expenses. So the income statement is really used to look at tax and to make sure that you are spending your money wisely, while the balance sheet is to make sure that your assets never are less than your liabilities. Okay, it wants to make sure that you are liquid enough and solvent enough. Speaking of these two, remember the difference between profit and profitability. Two businesses can make profit of 2,000 Rand, both of them. But if one business had to spend 8,000 Rand and one business had to spend 98,000 Rand, the one that spent less to get relatively the same amount of profit is more profitable. Okay, remember do that little math sum that I showed you in class. Okay, the other one is solvency. So solvency means that you've got enough assets, enough total assets to cover all liabilities. Problem is that solvency takes into account things like lands and buildings. So we often use liquidity where we look at the short-term liabilities and the short-term things. We want to make sure that if we are in trouble tomorrow or even in a day for a week from now, that we've got enough assets to cover it. Now, how do we do that? Okay, the first thing that we have is we have the asset test ratio. Okay, the asset test ratio is almost the same as the current ratio, but it doesn't take into account inventory. Okay, so it is also one of the liquidity ratios, one of the two that in the current ratio, but because it doesn't take into account trading inventory, it gives you a better indication of if the business was in trouble, you'd still be able to pay off your debt. And you'd like to make sure that you have a 1-to-1 ratio. You'd like to at least have one current asset without inventory to one current liability. Okay, that's one of our liquidity ratios, but the word that you look for there is you make sure that you know that it's minus inventory. Okay, the second one is called the current ratio. This one is slightly easier. It's all short-term. It's also a liquidity measure, but it's all short-term assets versus all short-term liabilities. And you'd like to have a ratio of close to 2-to-1. Why? Because when you do the asset test, you've got to take out inventory. So with inventory, you'd like it to be significantly higher. Okay, so a ratio too high is not efficient though either. Guys, you don't want to have so many assets that you have too many assets, because if you have all that money in the bank, you could be using it more efficiently. So you don't want a ratio of 625, for example. Okay, then the last one is your gearing ratios, where you take your shareholders' total debt divided by your shareholders' equity. So it's a proportion of capital that comes from debt, and this is the best way to find out how much risk a business has. Guys, you never want to have too high of a gearing ratio because it means a higher level of financial risk, meaning that you had if your financial thing is high, it means that your total debt was too high. Okay, so you want to make sure that your shareholders' equity is enough. Okay, because if it's too high, it means that everything was financed by debt, meaning the top of your fraction is too high, meaning you have too much debt and that you are actually geared too highly. Okay, that's why it's called the gearing ratio, so please make sure that you look at it. Okay, but the key word there is financial risk. So to recap, okay, if you want to know liquidity, you look at your two current and asset test ratio. If you want to look at solvency, you look at the solvency ratio, which is just total assets, total liabilities. If you want to know financial risk, you look at gearing ratio. Okay, for your research based or your resource based, sorry, you've got to make sure that you are using resources both tangible and intangible to the best of the business's capabilities. Guys, if you want to look at the resource base, you look at your things, Like, for example, your human capital, your human resources, your physical capital, your intangible resources. The one thing about this is you've got to know that it is only really viable for internal analysis and not external analysis. So, as I said earlier, you have monetary capital, you have physical capital, you have natural resources, you have human resources. Those are all tangible. Your intangible resources are things like your copyright, your patent, your skills, your own knowledge, your own things that you can't touch, but that you still use to the business's full advantage. Okay, obviously this you know a little bit more. I'm not going to spend too much time. Yeah. The second analysis is your your value chain analysis. Okay, so from it you can see there are primary activities like inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, marketing and sales, and then after service. And then you also have your secondary ones, which are known as infrastructure, human resource management, technological development, and procurement. Okay, I'm going to talk about each of them in detail. What you need to know about the value chain is it looks at each step that can add value to the business and areas where business can improve. Okay, what you need to think about is, for example, a product is much better because a product goes through each of these stages. Okay, whereas it's very difficult to actually look at service orientated because they don't go through all stages. They don't. How do you assess the value that someone's time and skill adds to a product? Okay, assessing the value that you've added when you do operations or inbound logistics or procurement or technology is a lot simpler with a product because we can attach a price to it. You can't attach a price to a human being's effort. Guys, so inbound logistics we spoke about in class, it involves anything receiving, storing, distributing. Okay, it deals with going to your suppliers, it deals quite heavily with your procurement agents, so it includes transportation, the storage of goods, looking for it. Remember when we talk about warehousing, okay, if you need to put something in a central location, all of that you can talk about right here. The second is operations. So operations means making the product into a more unique thing. So remember there are three ways. You could do mass production. Mass production refers to making a product that is on large quantity, low cost, and all looks exactly the same. You could do job production where you finish one job like a wedding dress and then you continue to the next one. You could do batches where you do them in small batches and then test them out. So it's the designing of clothes, turning them into something smaller and more valuable. Okay, when it comes to marketing and sales, I'm not going to go into depth with marketing. You know enough about marketing to go crazy over here. Service, exactly, we've spoken about. It includes anything that you need to have to keep the satisfaction. How well organized are your tills? How long is your waiting time? Do you have an online website? Can they reach you on this online website? Do the customers have a reason to come back to you is what you should be asking yourself. Yeah. Okay. So procurement, I'm pretty sure we don't have to talk about. I will talk about it again, about sourcing materials. When you do procurement, you have to worry about location. Are you close? Are you far? What's your transport costs? It deals with inbound logistics. Procurement is something that we have spoken about in the past. Okay. When it comes to technologically development, we've spoken about this. It's about tracking orders. Do you have an online platform? Can you engage with customers? Do you have a social media page? Do you have something that can help the business to grow in that respect? Okay. So the last one is human resource management. So are you able to manage your workforce? We've spoken about HR for the whole time period. So can we look after our workforce? Are our workers happy? What does our morale look like? All of the above. Okay, are you well equipped to assist customers? Okay, infrastructure. Infrastructure is what is your building? How strong is your building? How big is your warehouse? Do you have enough space for everyone? Can you look after the thing? Okay, can you look after everyone in the building? All of this refers to infrastructure and to make sure that those places are in place. So technologically is part of infrastructure. Do you have servers that can maintain an online platform? Infrastructure kind of goes among all. Do you see the value chain looks internal, external when you're dealing with suppliers, when you're dealing with HR, whether you're dealing with marketing, whether you are dealing with your customers, and when you're dealing with service industries. It is both internal, external. It looks across the whole supply chain. There are various steps you can analyze. It is one of our more in-depth analysis based on resource, which only looks at a couple of aspects. Okay, this one is more in-depth than the rest. Okay, so the last one that we can talk about here is your balance scorecard. Okay, the balance scorecard looks at 4 perspectives. It's financial, customer, internal processes, and learning and growth. So I'm going to go over each one and how do the customers. So there's the questions. How do we appear to our stakeholders? How should we, how our internal process excels? Are we innovative? Are we learning to grow and succeed? Guys, this balanced scorecard is best for internal and external. Internal being finance, internal process and learning and growth. External being customer. And it also the one that addresses stakeholders. If you are talking about balanced scorecard, you need to be talking about stakeholders. Why? Because all four of those are different stakeholders that need to be addressed. Financial addresses your shareholders, customer, learning and growth, and internal is more your employees. Each of them are addressing a specific stakeholder. That's what you need to focus on. Okay, I'm going to give you a little, there's your homework. Obviously, we don't have to do it now. So, when it comes to financial, this perspective focuses on financial outcomes and the performance of the business. So your key components of it are things like, is the business creating revenue? We can do things we can monitor the profitability. We can measure it by looking at the percentile difference between revenue this year and next year. We can look at what does our return on investment look like? What does our cash flow look like? We can do it by analyzing the various ratios. What is last year's ratio versus this year's ratio? Okay, when you look at how, you need to make sure that you're giving me keywords. Measure last year's ratio. Analyze the previous year's ratio. Okay, compare from previous years. Interpret the growth of the revenue. Okay, give me those keywords. Okay, when it comes to customers, we look at their thing. We look at their satisfaction. What is the level of satisfaction? How do we do that? We look at things like, for example, our surveys. We give out surveys. We see where's customers, are they satisfied? The service comes out. Customer retention are things like our loyalty cards. Are customers coming back? We need to see. Are we assessing their ability? Are we looking at our market share? We can try and work out our market share. How many people are coming to us versus going to our competitors? Okay, and are we creating lifetime value? Guys, again, when it comes to how, give me keywords as to what. And when it comes to what, you give me the definition. Okay, please make sure you make that distinction. Okay, internal processes. We look at things like operational efficiency. Okay, we look at how much are we producing this year versus producing last year. We got to look at our quality control, meaning you can take a batch, you can do spot checks. You can make sure that we are looking to ensure our quality matches what the customer wants. Are we innovating? How is our supply chain being managed? Are we looking through the whole supply chain? Okay, are we looking at our staff? Are our staff well trained? Are they well organized? Are we innovative? Are we creating more? Are we creating better products? All of the above. Okay, when it comes to learning and growth, I'm moving a bit faster because I got load shedding in a while and I need to export this video because I want to give it to you this evening. So it focuses on to innovate, to learn, to grow. There you look at employee training and development. How do we do it? We do it through CETAs. When we look at technological advancements, are we growing? Are our employees satisfied? Do we have the retention of our employees? Are they staying? Are they with us for a long period of time? So do we have those values, those cultures? Are we making sure that our decision making is well done? Are we creating technological advancements? Are we creating new things? Are we growing? If we don't grow, then we are going to struggle to come up with new things. If we don't learn, new advancements are not going to happen. All of these are things to consider when doing the balanced scorecard. Okay, so for a clothing retailer, you've got to look at things like monitor key indicators. This is the how. I made sure to make sure you know how. Your profit margins, your return on investment. With customers, it's look at the satisfaction through feedback, look at reviews, look at loyalty programs. Internal process is you've got to look at your supply chain. You've got to reduce lead times, which means between various stages. What does your productivity quality look like? Okay, when it comes to learning, you've got to invest in training. You've got to check that the training is working. You've got to get feedback. And that's one thing you've got to talk about. Getting feedback from your employees. Guys, learning and growth and doing the skills development program doesn't help if it's not something your employees want or employees need. Okay, you've got to get constant feedback from them as well. Okay. So when it comes to legislation, I'm not going to ask you legislation for this test. I will do another video on another time for our legislation. But I'm going to end the video here for now, and then hopefully this will help you guys. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and I will help as best I can.